Hello and welcome. This is the last video of this series because sadly H.G. Wells will not be included on the test. I think it was one of the more interesting books that we mentioned, but okay. Today we're talking about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which you can see on the screen now, and his series of Sherlock Holmes. We specifically talk about the first novel starting Sherlock Holmes, so A Study in Scarlet. And I think this is something that I understood a lot better than the 3 previous videos, so hopefully this video will be more bearable and make more sense and be less chaotic. So let's get into it. So this book fits into crime fiction and detective fiction. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is known for popularizing the genre. It became so popular, it's popular to this day. There are so many spin-offs, and because it's in public domain, literally anyone can write a story about Sherlock Holmes. We theorize that Holmes is so popular, especially for spin-offs, because he's become this archetype of an amateur detective. He's different from previous detectives in fiction because, and this is something that Conan Doyle mentions in the book itself, he starts talking about Edgar Allan Poe's Dupin and someone else, I don't remember who, and he mentions these other fictional detectives and says that, Sherlock says this, he goes, yes, they existed, and okay, they were good, but they were slow. They often didn't see links as soon as they happened. Dupin solved cases 6 months after they happened, and according to Sherlock, he's simply better. So this shows how Sherlock is different from other detectives, but it's also an example of metafiction because a fictional character is talking about other fictional characters which exist in our real world. So, within Sherlock Holmes and The Study in Scarlet, we get to see the audience surrogate. So, an audience surrogate is a proxy for the reader, and such characters think like the reader thinks, asks the questions the reader is thinking, and provide the reader with someone to identify with. During the lecture, we mentioned that we become a sort of parasite latched onto the narrator, and this is audience surrogate. In the case of this novel, we have Dr. Watson, who starts living with Sherlock, and we see the whole story through his eyes because the story is created through his diary entries. The relationship between Sherlock and Watson starts out of necessity because they are both looking for flatmates, but they don't have enough money to sort of rent out a flat by themselves. Watson is really easily amused, which strokes Sherlock Holmes' ego, because he can say something and Watson is like, oh, I never would have thought of that, you are so amazing, oh my goodness, you must have cheated me and known these things before. They are both men of science. Watson was a surgeon, Sherlock is studying something scientific at the university, and he also knows a lot about science and biology, as we can see in the way in which he solves his cases. Also, some of Watson's skills are useful to Holmes, and sometimes Watson says something stupid, but Holmes manages to sort of make sense of it, and this leads Holmes in the right direction. They make a good duo despite their differences, and they are also in a similar social class, so they understood each other better. More on Sherlock himself. So he's amazing in what he does, he's a great detective, but he lacks general knowledge, like he doesn't know about Mikołaj Kopernik and his theory, he has no idea how space works, he doesn't know about certain other things, so we can see how he's greatly focused on only the things that are necessary in his life. I think this helps humanize Sherlock because it shows that while he is a genius in some spheres, he's worse than a child in others, which makes him more attainable and makes him more of a round character than a flat character. And of course he also has more negative traits. He tortures Watson with his music, he lacks knowledge, he's very messy, he's a bad flatmate due to his experiments which he keeps doing, and this makes him a character who is no longer unattainable. Instead we have a vision of a genius who is still a human. It makes him more realistic. And this is why he's so interesting, because he's complex. And also the cases he takes on are realistic. We see murders and kidnappings, which could very well happen in real life, at least in the Victorian era. So now looking at the questions. What roles do Gregson and Lestrade play at the Lauriston Gardens crime scene? So Gregson and Lestrade, or Lestrade, I'm not sure, are representatives of Scotland Yard, and they sort of serve as comic relief because they're often a lot dumber than Sherlock is, and when Sherlock corrects them in their dumbness, or when they come up with these stupid hypotheses, it's sort of funny for the reader because we know, of course, it's not correct. But they're also a foil to show Sherlock's superiority. So because we see that even official detectives don't understand things straight away, whereas Sherlock needs 2 days to solve a case, they rely on Sherlock's help, but they see it as a bit of a failure, and they have hurt egos because of this. It's a great amount of shame for a professional detective to admit that they are dumber than a guy who goes to university and is just an amateur. But we need to remember that Holmes is also dependent on them, because Scotland Yard not only leave him with some sense of legitimacy, because of course he also takes on crimes from people off the street, and because the people know that he works with Scotland Yard, he's instantly seen as someone actually skilled, not just a random guy living in London. But also because Scotland Yard provide him with access to murder cases, to crime scenes, to morgues. In return, he works pro bono, so for free, and he also doesn't take credit, as we see in the study in Scarlet. Despite him solving the case, Gregson and Lestrade get the praise for everything in the newspapers. Question 6. The story is split into 2 parts. So the first part are Watson's diary entries about the case, and it ends right when Sherlock catches the criminal, whereas the second part is drastically different, and we have a totally different narration, and we are in a setting in America, in the plains, where we meet a group of Mormons. And we mentioned how this is really important, despite being surprising. Like, at first you could feel as if you're reading a totally different book, which got there by accident. But it's necessary because it tells the backstory of the murderer. It gives us a motive for the crime, gives us reason behind the murder, and it lets us judge whether a murderer deserves sympathy or not. So in this case, actually, the man who murdered the other 2 guys in London was getting revenge because those guys were Mormons in the past, and they killed his lover and his lover's father. So this part, the second part, called The Country of Saints, is also a way of commenting on organized religion. Doyle believed in like fairies, etc. So he thought that organized religions were corrupted. The people interacted with representatives of God, but not God himself, which was seen as a sort of way of cheating people into belief. And prophets are an organization that serve as a proxy. So they're fake, they're not real, they're just trying to prey on people. Okay, 2 final questions. When Conan Doyle wrote the story, London was still recovering from the Jack the Ripper attacks. Was Holmes's popularity a direct result of this? So, while this may have been a result, because it gave people hope that every criminal can be caught and punished, and Sherlock became an escape from an unpleasant reality, it wasn't the only sort of extraordinary thing about Conan Doyle's story, which links us to the 11th question. So, traditional detective stories present the facts, and let the reader work out the crime. Why did Doyle reject this formula? So in Doyle's, we sort of, as I said earlier, latch onto Watson, and we see the 2 main characters work out the crimes, but we don't get the facts. We see everything after. And we talked about how it keeps the reader interested, and it also reflected his own interests and way of thinking, because Doyle was involved both in medicine and crime investigation. So the way in which Sherlock is written is a lot more interesting, because we get to meet Sherlock, we get to see his way of thinking after something's happened, so we don't spoil the story, and it also adds more mystery and makes you think more than just giving you dry facts. When you see Sherlock's sort of crazy perspective and the fact that Sherlock keeps many things from the reader, or rather Watson does, because Watson doesn't know everything that Sherlock thinks. And because Watson is slightly dumber than the average reader, as we mentioned during the lecture, it makes it more entertaining because we are sort of 1 step ahead of Watson, but always 1 step behind Sherlock. And I think that's everything I can say about this. Good luck on the test on Friday. Wish me good luck too. I hope everyone passes. I hope these video lectures helped. I know they were chaotic at times, but maybe you'll remember at least some key terms or something. I also have a literature glossary available for everyone. And yeah, thank you for your attention, and bye bye.